All right. Hello, everybody. We are live and my dog is barking, of course. Hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Patricia Meredith. Welcome to my channel. I am here today with a very special guest, Miss Leah, who is, how would you describe your job? What is the technical name?
So the technical name of my job is a rare book conservator.
Rare book conservator, yes. So she's always got her hands on antique books and book restoration. And if you follow her on Instagram, which I highly recommend you do, she's Bibliobrunette. And so some of you might know her already with her beautiful feed there. She's always featuring just gorgeous old books and just the beautiful covers and bindings. And it's just, I feel like with the 4-edge painting that's coming out, we're kind of getting back into that. There's some people who are trying to bring back that beauty to publishing books, making them more unique. But a lot of that has been lost. And so I'm so thankful for people like Leah who go back there and restore all this history and we can enjoy it and learn from it. So Leah, tell us about yourself. What do you do? What's your favorite part of the job? That sort of thing.
Sure. So what I do is I work with books and I work with them very, very closely. But I would say one of the differences between me and someone who's a rare book dealer or someone who's a bibliographer, someone who studies books, is the purpose of my job is to really understand their materiality. So I'm very, very much focused on what are the materials that they're made out of, what is the book structure. There's many different types of book bindings and their structures. What that tells us about the people at that period, and how can I best keep the historicness of the books intact. So there's definitely lots of terms that people hear. So they hear conservation, they hear restoration. In North America, these are two different terms. In Europe, they're actually considered the same thing. Okay. So within conservation, what we're doing is we're trying to be able to preserve the historic state of the book as much as possible. We're not trying to replace many materials. We're just trying to really understand what is the book about, what is on it, and how can we preserve any signs of history that are a part of the book, including its provenance. So if there's any book plate inside of it, we're not trying to take them out. If there's any, like a fingerprint smudge on it, we're not going to erase that. We want to preserve all the things about the book that really tells us as much as possible about the materiality.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see the difference between those two. So in Europe, then, are they not treating them the same way? Are they more about restoring?
No, they are. It's just actually a matter of terms. So it's just more of a vocabulary term. So the terms restoration or conservation mean the same thing more to the European community, whereas restoration and conservation have two different meanings within North America.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so they're not going around removing Anne Boleyn's.
Oh no, and in some places I would say even some of the European ethics around books and their conservation. If a book is broken, they can be even different places can be even more strict than places found in the United States. So it can vary from place to place depending on the state that the book is in, what the book could be used for in the future. So if it's going to be put on display or if it's going to be kept in a private section of a rare library, kept on a shelf, So there's different parts that comes into the ethics of what decisions we're going to make and when. And so we'll talk to curators. We could even talk to family members who own the book. How did the person who owned the book treat it if they're no longer alive? We will learn a lot about the historic uses of the book as well in order to preserve that as much as possible.
Awesome. Okay. And can you tell us where you're working right now, or is that?
Yes, I can should definitely share that. I have, so in addition to being a book conservator, I developed a great interest in color science, and that came from working with medieval pigments. It came from documentation. I had questions like, why don't the images that my cell phone take match actually what I'm seeing when I'm looking at things? And I developed this question so much that I decided to pursue another degree in it, a PhD in color science. And right now I'm actually at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm within their PhD of color science program, and I'm working on imaging for cultural heritage. A lot of my research is inspired by my conservation work. So I'm very interested in books, in documents, in how do we show them better, how can we image them well, and how do we share them with the public. You know, the big thing is like, what is all this history for if it's not being shared, if it's not being used for education? Yeah. And so that's my big passion for this. But it definitely expands beyond books and paper. So working with paintings, working with sculpture, or any other type of object that might be able to come in. I'm very interested in doing color science types of research on it.
Wow. Okay. So what were the steps that brought you to that? Like how did you start and how did you get there? That's so specific.
It is. So when I was an undergrad, I ended up accidentally, if I could say, pursuing chemistry. I did not plan to pursue chemistry when I got into college. But I was really fascinated. I had with how the material bit of the world, like how does this all this stuff that we have, how does it work? What makes it hold together? What makes, a cup that I have really different from, a bag that I might use? And I kind of like the games that, or not the game, but like the pattern, seeing the pattern in chemistry. So I ended up pursuing that, but in order to balance that, I ended up also looking at art history. I got a minor in art history. I got a minor in studio art because I enjoyed art so much. And when I found out that you could become a conservator, combining chemistry, material science, the knowledge of that with pursuing it towards art, I was like, this is the most amazing thing. I'm so excited. And that's what I want to do. So I ended up, after getting my undergraduate degree, I ended up doing a bunch of different what's called pre-program internships. And these are internships meant to develop your skills as a conservator before you apply for a master's program within conservation. So I did a bunch of those. I ended up working at places like the Naval Underwater Archaeology Conservation Lab, which was incredible. So I worked on, there was a cannon, I think that, yeah, there was a cannon or an anchor that we were working on. I worked on like swords, buttons that came up from shipwrecks, things like that. Then I ended up working with lots of things on paper and lots of things with books. And it was then that I found that I just really loved the medium of working with paper and books. And I decided to make that my specialty. So when I decided to pursue conservation in grad school, I knew I wanted to do it on books. I really just love the form of the book. I love how they feel. I think we as readers, we just love picking up a book and like going through it. I think a lot of people do like the sniffing, with a new book. But there's just something so tactile, so personal, and just so lovely about that. And it's something that, throughout thousands of years since the book came out, it hasn't changed that much in form. Yeah. And it's something that I think is so lovely. I think it's one of the most brilliant inventions mankind has ever made. And it's incredibly enduring and it's very personal. And that's something I love about it. And so I ended up becoming a book conservator, which I still do now. I do private practice and I work with different types of museums now. Working with them to survey items, doing interventive treatments, and for private clients too. And then among all of that, I discovered color science and how much I loved color, how much I love in medieval manuscripts, all the different pigments that you see and what that really means. And I also really got into understanding what can the phone do? Like what can our cell phones do with imaging? And that really led me into my program where I'm at now.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you have any examples for us?
I do,
Yeah.
actually. So, one of the things, so I also do internships for undergraduate students here at RIT. And I have, as part of the teaching collection, I have a manuscript leaf here, which has these beautiful little illuminated letters on there that have
Yes.
gold. They have, very tiny white on here, a little bit of red. I don't know if the color is coming out that well, but it's the types of pigments that you'll see on different medieval manuscripts. This one's a little later. This one is not from medieval times, so it's a little bit later. I think this is 16th century from what I remember. So thinking about more of the Renaissance, but it's still in keeping. Manuscript creation has not changed, and you can still find modern day manuscript makers too.
Wow. That is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm just fascinated by all of this. Let's see. So you said, yes, it's kind of a hobby and a job. You kind of do a little bit of everything. Let's see. What makes your type of collection of books different from other types of collections, like your personal collection? What do you love to collect?
So my favorite thing to collect are actually, I like to collect books based on their materials.
Okay.
And their types of damage.
Ooh.
So that is something that is not typical. I think a lot of people collect books because of an author that they love, or an illustrator, or it even could be a type of binding. But my collection is really based around materials. I'm looking for a wide variety of materials. I'm looking for things that are a little unusual. And I'm also really looking for damage. I love seeing people doing homemade interventions on their books because they cared for them so much. And I have a few examples to show everyone. So this is a book that you might look at and you go, oh, that's really sad. No, why would anyone want to do this? But this book has been well loved and used. And you can see here this piece. So originally this book was covered in leather, and this piece is vellum. So this is actually that same material that is used for creating medieval manuscripts. So it's the preparation of an animal skin, but it's in a different way than leather. Leather is a different type of preparation. And somebody loved this book so much, its spine fell off, something that we see even today on Books and Damage, but they created a homemade version of a spine to keep it together. And I saw this book and I thought, oh gosh, someone actually really quite loved that. And they try to create their own repair. As a conservator, I would keep this on it instead of replacing it with a new piece of leather, because this really shows how the owner of it interacted with it and actually tried to preserve it as much as possible.
So out of curiosity, what book is it?
This book, it's a French book. I don't read French. So this is the other thing. Oh, this is, it's a book about the apostles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a French book. This is where I would say my collection really veers off. I actually don't know too much about the contents of the books that I work with.
Okay.
Because they're written in languages that I don't know. So I can read a little bit of French and a little bit of Latin. So I get the gist of what the books are about.
Okay.
But my focus is very much on their materiality and what's going on with them. And this particular book, which love seeing this. So this is called, it has marbled paper on the inside. And this particular pattern is called a French swirl or French curl, sorry. And it's typically made out of 3 colors. It could be a red, yellow, and a blue. And all of this paper so this book is actually from 1752. So this tiny book. So something about the evangelists, the apostles.
Yeah.
Could be letters. I don't read French very well. Everything I've learned on the job. But yeah, but one of the wonderful things about this book as well is because it's damaged, it actually tells us something about how the book was originally made. And so you mentioned the sprayed edges and the four edge paintings, which are making a really big comeback right now. But there's quite a few books that have these red edges on them. And this one did have a red edge and it's worn away. But what's very interesting is, as a conservator, we're very interested in how the books were made, what's the process that they were done in. And we can learn a bit about the process is that this is the board of the book, and you see that it retains some of this red pigment. And so this means that when they were binding the book, they put on the boards and then they did the red.
Right.
So the order in which things are made can be actually quite important. And so having books actually in different states of disrepair is very important.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is so cool. So your collection is mostly different kinds of disrepair.
Yeah, and different types of materials and different types of bindings.
Okay.
So when people ask me, oh, and what's the insides of it? I can show you another one. This one I have a funny story about. So this one, if you can see this beautiful pattern that's on it, and on the back, you can see a little bit more.
It's like
yeah, so it has a bit of a glistening to it, a little bit of gold. This is called Dutch gilt paper. Okay. And Dutch gilt paper is a decorative paper that became extremely popular. And it was actually mostly, I think from what my memory recalls, it was actually mostly produced around like Germany and Italy. Okay. Not actually made by the Dutch, but the trade routes. You have to remember, like the Dutch, the trade routes were huge. Mm-hmm. So I never saw anything like this before until I went to grad school, and I ended up going to London First, which is a rare book fair. Okay. I highly recommend anyone who's interested in antiquarian books, go to a rare book fair. Even if you don't buy anything, you will see some of the most amazing things there. So I went to a rare book fair and I saw this and I desperately wanted it just because of the Dutch gilt covering material. And the seller was like, "Oh, do you read Italian?" And I said, "No." And he was like, "Why do you want the book?" And I said, "Well, I don't have an example of Dutch gilt paper in my collection." And he was like, "Oh, well, yeah, I could see that. All right." It was a lovely interaction, and he was a wonderful seller. And I always highly recommend everyone who's interested in antiquarian books go to a rare book fair and see what's out there. And the other thing is, a lot of antiquarian books, not all of them are extraordinarily expensive. They're not all hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. You can find some wonderful finds. Things that I've added to my teaching collection, I've never spent like thousands of dollars on anything. I'm on a student stipend budget. I can't do that. But you can meet some amazing people and they'll able to show you some incredible things. And you might be able to walk away with something really wonderful.
Yeah. Do you have any fairs that you would recommend locally, like in the US?
Oh gosh, actually I don't. I know that they do pop up. You can look on I think the ABA website. Only because I don't participate in too many of them. I'm sorry, like COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know I've seen you get several from. There's somebody on Instagram.
Oh, that guy with the books.
Yes.
Zubarul Islam. He is amazing rare bookseller. He is absolutely he is my favorite currently. Like, I have bought so many wonderful things for my collection from him, and I can actually show you quite a few things that I have loved, things that are a bit unusual.
Excellent.
So this book, if I can actually flip to the title page, because this book is very strange. So this is about the martyrs for the Catholic faith, and it is this incredible book that's likely actually a few books that were printed and then were put together. Something that is so sweet about this book is that there's a little bit of musical notation on the inside.
Oh my goodness.
And something that I love about this book is there's all of these little notes inside of it from the owner, and these little red crosses are marked throughout where they thought something was really important. So this particular book, from what I remember, it talks about the different martyrs that you would find if you different that you might celebrate throughout the year, and like how to do that and why. And so you have these little dates. So there's like April, all the months that you'll find as well. So there's a lot to this book. Here's a beautiful, lovely page of handwritten notes from the owner. And yeah, I absolutely love this book. But one of the great things that I love about this book is that it is different than other ones. So when I first pulled out this book and I showed it here, this is the front of it and this is the back, and there's these beautiful brass clasps on it, as well as this brass furniture that's marking these corners on the front and the back. And this book is covered with a material that is not leather. This is actually alum tawed pigskin. And this is something that was very commonly done for this beautiful like white cover, and the oils and the touching from either the skin or from people's hands themselves over the years have made it be this color, but it's more of this beautiful white color when it was originally made. But one of the great things about this book is from the mid 1700s.
Oh, wow.
But it looks a lot older.
It does, yeah.
It looks like it's from a century earlier.
Right.
Which is something that was done intentionally. So this book was actually we know it was published in Rome, printed in Rome, and it was likely bound there as well. And the person was likely, we're not sure, but likely part of the church. And they probably wanted it to look like an older, more prestigious type of like a tome feel to it. And so instead of doing a mid 18th century binding to it, they gave it a binding that is actually around a century earlier and something that would have been used then. The other thing is this book, I don't know if you'll be able to hear, but it has wooden boards on it. So incredible. So historically, books were made, they weren't made with paper. Paper hadn't become very popular yet in Europe. So the earliest books we know, medieval manuscripts, they're made with vellum on the inside, which you needed heavy boards on the outside and clasps in order to keep all of the pages very flat, because with humidity or like changes of use and everything like that, vellum will continue to move because it is created from the proteins of the skin and everything. It will actually continue to move and shape and react to the environment that it's in. So if you wanted to keep it all flat, you had to put it between heavy boards and you would clasp it together. And so they bound this mid 18th century book in the same process, which is something I love. So this book is a little hidden in disguise.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Which we did have a question in the comments about, and you mentioned the oils in your hands. So you're not wearing cotton gloves.
Yes. Yes.
How is that?
Yeah. So there's, I think there's been a Hollywoodized misconception about the handling of books, old books in paper. So we don't wear cotton gloves. It's not a thing. It used to be a thing for a while, but it's not a thing anymore. And that is because more damage actually occurs from mishandling an item due to not being able to feel it in your hands with the cotton gloves. And so it's much easier for you to drop a book, a paper to slip out, or as you're trying to turn pages, it grabs one, or the cotton will actually snag something and cause more damage. So what it has been done, there's been a lot of research on this, and for book and paper communities, good, clean hands are the best things that you can do for your books. It allows you to feel the tactileness, allows you to feel where something might be more sensitive or more delicate. As you're turning the pages, you can actually grip the book better and be able to handle it more without the worry of it slipping or snagging anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When I would go into the research center to do research for my books, so during COVID specifically, he would always make sure that he was like, don't use antibacterial soap, like the automatic hand wash. He said that was worse. So I'd always have to go to the bathroom and wash my hands really good before I came in. But I always wondered, like, I don't need to wear gloves when I'm in here. But
yeah. Now, I would say, though, that if you're handling any antique metal items, you absolutely want to wear gloves. And that is because even if your hands are really clean, there's still little oils and salts in your hands that will cause your fingerprints to be left in antique metal items. So if you have any antique metal items, or if you've ever had to like polish a silver set or something, if you put your thumb against it and let it sit, you'll see your little thumbprint, your like fingerprint actually etched in the metal. So for anything really like hard metal related, you do want to be wearing gloves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I specifically don't write in a time when they had fingerprinting yet, but that always fascinates me for future books when I write after they've discovered that. So if you had a murderer, they're always so specific about, they're wearing gloves, so they can't leave a fingerprint. But they'll sometimes fingerprint on shows and stuff on paper. So can you leave a fingerprint on paper, or really just on metal?
Yeah, you can leave a fingerprint on paper, especially today. There's such like forensics technology that's called touch forensics. So even if you've like touched something, they can get your DNA off of that. So DNA forensics technology has definitely way more advanced now, and you can get fingerprints off of different things. And there's also occasions of like you also need the right conditions for you to leave the fingerprints. So the material has to be right, and your finger has to be oily enough, and all that sort of stuff like that. But today we also have touch forensics. So even if you've touched something, you didn't leave a fingerprint, as long as some of your DNA is there, you'll get caught.
That's just too easy now.
Yeah. I was like, good luck serial killers. Right. Like, you're all gone now. There's a reason why they peaked. And
right. Yeah.
For a while. Yeah. It's because forensics really caught up to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So let's see. So if you could have a library with one type of binding, what would it be?
Yes. With different types of binding. So this is bound differently than this little patootie. So gorgeous. Different than this book. The one type of binding, if I should be very specific, is I would love to have an entire library of what's called a limp vellum binding. And this is my absolute favorite type of binding because it is extremely durable. The vellum feels very luxurious. And the other thing is that these books are not used with an adhesive that's part of the structure of the binding itself. And what enables that what that encourages with the book is that it becomes extremely durable. So one of the wonderful things or unfortunate things that happened, but a wonderful thing came out of it, is the flood of Florence that occurred. So it's a historic event. You can look it up, but basically it was, millions of items where Florence became submerged. There were these flood waters that came through. And then people who, that conservation wasn't really a field just yet, but this was one of the big pushes for conservation, especially with books and paper, to emerge as its own field. There was such a need in order to preserve the history that had actually been submerged within these floodwaters. And one of the things that they found was that books that were made with vellum as its cover, but also this limp vellum structure where adhesives are not used on the spine of the book. They ended up reacting really well under these different types of extreme weather conditions.
Huh.
And they just feel great. One of the things I love about them is that they're not necessarily a hard cover, so there's no board in here.
Okay.
This one is actually just made with a piece of paper on the inside, but it adds enough structure that you're able to feel it. But it is a little bendable. You can't really see it, but you can see how it would move.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Whereas like, no, this doesn't.
Kind of like a paperback versus a hardback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's something that I really love about them. The other thing I love about them and is that you get this feature that you can see. This one's got tiny of them, but these are called yaps. And this is where they've actually have a little bit extra material on the covers to just go over that foredge a little bit, to just protect the book block a little bit more.
Okay.
And some of them have much larger yaps, but I love them because a lot of them have this feature. That's something you don't get on anything that has a stiff board on it. But I love seeing little yaps on there because it just adds a nice little type of like enclosure to the front of the book as it's there.
Wow. So then what are the other kinds of binding, comparing that one to?
Oh gosh, so this would be a type of tight back binding. So this is where like the leather is directly adhered onto the book block. Actually, let me hold it the correct way. It was upside down before. So you can have this, and so you have like spine linings that go on this to create a stiffer type of a spine.
Okay.
This one you can have hollows on your books, which this is a hollow. So right here. So the covering material is not adhered onto the spine. Then there's like different historic types of bindings as well. I mean, there's so many different types and styles. We could go on for a while about this. But if anyone is interested, there's lots of great resources out there regarding different historic types of bindings. Those are just some really basic ones. There's also different periods. There's Gothic bindings. There's what's the other one? Gothic. There are. I'm so sorry. Of course, this is happening during an interview.
So what about pages? Is there different types of pages, like ways that they would sew it in versus?
Oh, absolutely. There's lots of different styles of binding itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear terms sometimes interchangeably of like, this is like this binding, but then there's like the sewings. The sewing is also can be called the binding. So sometimes there's these interchangeable terms, but this is another style. So this is where these are called bands. Though these areas that we see that are raised over. And so how a book is sewn up is a book is laid out. All of the folios and the sections will be put together. Depending on the type of book, you could have folios, single folios, or you could have whole sections together. And you'll layer them up. And then what you have is you're going to bind them onto a string, which will keep the entire book block together. And you'll cut those strings when you're done. And there's lots of different styles of putting them on that. So you can do like a herringbone style, you can do a doubles, you can do singles. There's different, there's like a French butterfly style. It depends on the purpose. It depends on the purpose of what you're going to use that book for. You might keep it very simple. This is a very simple single style. And I'm going to try to give a close up. So this book was never covered with boards. It was just covered with this beautiful, again, French curl marbled paper. And there's this beautiful single style. So each of the sections here were sewn onto these cords here. And this is every section has one thread through it that goes over, or you might go around the cord and then like come back into the section, or you might just go over it and then back through. There's lots of ways of doing that, and you might choose one style over another. This book in particular, so this book doesn't have a cord. These are actually bits of alum tod skin that have been split. That are used, and you can see how it's been this beautiful double row right here, used in order to create that strength for this book. So that way, when it's continually opened and used, it's, like there's a reason why it's lasted for so long. And here we can actually see that movement. And the other thing that you can see here is this was part of a support. This is a vellum support, a spine support here. So this was put over there. There would have been another one up here, but that one's been lost through time. And each of the other sections would have one as well in order to line the spine of the book.
Well, and like you said, it's great to see those broken ones that are revealing more about how the book was actually made and all of that. So Alethea was wondering, is there a difference between folios and books? I was wondering the same thing, because you hear about like Shakespeare's folios. Is that?
Oh, yeah. So there's a terminology difference sometimes with so these are more of like printers terms. I'll be honest, I'm not totally sure, but it is a book, but I'm actually not sure why they're called Shakespeare's folios, and I'm so sorry. Perhaps I should know this information, but there is one of the terminologies though is that there is a specific term of a folio, which is a sheet and then folded once.
Okay.
And that can be considered a folio. And then you can have sections, which is a bunch of folios together.
Right.
And that could make up part of your book. And then if you do that like with vellum, you can have, that's not called like sections anymore. They're called quires.
Okay.
So manuscripts have their own terminology. Once paper gets introduced, there's a new terminology that comes about. If you're particularly interested in this, there are some wonderful resources out there regarding book terminologies and the historicness of them and where they come from.
Wow. Wow. So it's as detailed as talking about different things with art. With material. Yeah. I take books for granted, I think.
No.
I've never really thought about all the different terminologies for all of those things that go into it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is like sometimes like when I talk about manuscripts or somebody else might talk about manuscripts, I see this a lot in auction sites. When I type in manuscript, to me, that means, in my world, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of medieval manuscript. It's handwritten. But manuscript also comes around with like just a general term meaning handwritten. So when you say, could I have, some manuscripts, it just means I would like some handwritten documents. So sometimes depending on the field that you're in and the terminologies that are used, there's different things that could appear. So it is really important to have like very precise language, and it also depends on the field. A lot of the fields like overlap, so sometimes we use terms that mean they mean different things depending on the field that you're in.
Well, because like in publishing, when like an agent asks for your manuscript, they just mean something unpublished usually.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's definitely not handwritten anymore.
Yeah, but it could be like the pre-published thing,
Right.
So it's how does this term evolve, and what are we talking about when we're using this term?
Oh, absolutely. Etymology is so much fun to dig into, and look at the history of words and stuff.
Yeah.
So another question was, is there any truth behind the whole acid-free photo album movement? So back to the oils in your hands.
Yeah. Okay. So acid-free photo albums, these are, there is truth to true acid-free photo albums. And I would say a lot of the photo albums that are like mass-produced and acid-free, I'm not sure I'll just say that. But there are resources by places such as Talus or University Supplies that they create items and materials for book conservators, for universities and archives and museums to use, which are actually like scientifically tested. And these things are very safe to use with your photographs. Photographs are their own thing. There are photograph conservators.
Okay.
It is its own field as well. There are some overlaps to it, but photographs can be very sensitive, especially to the pH, to that acidity, or how much base is in their materials. And so you do want to be very careful with them.
Right. Do you see any of that with your color science with the fronts? Like, is any of that acid free or?
Wait, with the what?
With like the color fronts that you have, the swirls and things like that. They're not going to be acid free.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you mean for like these?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the great. So this brings a really interesting point. Why? So this book is also from the 1700s. Okay. Beautiful white paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
It looks great.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Now, let me see if I have a book that is. I don't tend to have books from later times, but let me see if I do. Find a book that has yellowed pages. Okay, here's one that has a little bit of yellowing on it. Let me open it up. I found this adorable book called Books and Their History, which actually teaches a bit about books and their bindings. So this book, you can see on the edges, they're a little yellowed.
Yes.
And if you've ever noticed, you're like a 70s, 60s, 70s, or 80s copy paperback print book, it's yellowed.
Yeah.
Well, that has a lot more to do with the materiality of what actually is making up the pages. So what is actually making the page has changed. So historically, we made pages out of rags, cotton, hemp, and linen, and these types of fibers, these long fibrous materials that are very flexible. It's what we make our money out of, or what we used to make our money out of, because it's very durable. You can fold it a lot, you can use it a lot, and it will last for a very long time. But what's particular about these plant fibers that were being used is that they don't have a lot of acidity inherently in them. So they're not going to inherently break down. But what did happen was during the Industrial Revolution, and so this is one of the wonderful things about books, during the Industrial Revolution, they find a cheaper way to make paper. Paper was historically very expensive. And not many people were able to get their hands on their own books. Not many people also I would say there's a lot more people who knew how to read, I would say, than probably like the general misconception, like everybody's illiterate. Well, actually, there's a lot of people who knew how to read. But paper making was expensive. Printing is expensive. If you're going to buy something, you want it to last for a very long time. And it's only really until we get into the 19th century that we're really starting to like mass produce, because they were able to use wood pulp. Now, wood pulp is different fibers. It's these short fibers, and than the cotton or the hemp, which is these longer natural fibers, is a lot faster. There's a lot of trees. You can make a lot more books and pages out of this. However, it also had other chemicals that are part of trees themselves that you couldn't necessarily take out, or it was very expensive to take them out. But those cause an inherent chemical breakdown process in that. And that's what causes the pages to yellow and to become brittle, and they snap and they feel very difficult to turn. And that's what's actually going on. That won't happen with something made from cotton or from hemp. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the difference between these long fibers, these short fibers, the difference between the types of inherent chemicals that are found in the plants and what goes through the actual process of making the paper. Paper making changed a lot from hand making it versus putting it in these big tumblers and, you know, creating these really large sheets. If you see modern paper production, it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm ever thankful for it because it's one of the reasons why we're all able to own lots and lots of books.
Right. Yeah.
These modern processes. Yeah.
I had no idea there's so much chemistry.
Yeah. And it's changed even more since the Industrial Revolution because like you want glossy paper, you want paper that does this, you want paper that doesn't yellow, you know, so they're even adding even more things into these papers now. So yeah, so modern, I would say like 20th century paper making and 21st century paper making. I haven't really worked with any of those things because they're not falling apart yet.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Speaking of which, can you tell us about any of the books that you have personally restored in your travels of internships and work?
Yes. So actually, there's one of my favorite books that I've restored was this was actually a Victorian scrapbook. So this is actually something for you. But when I was in my master's program, there was a book that not many people wanted to take on because it would be very long, very intensive. But I was like, well, I have that, you know, I could do it, you know, type of attitude, which, you know, it was really incredible. But this woman had her grandmother's scrapbook, Victorian scrapbook, and her grandmother had beautiful watercolor and gouache paintings inside. You know, she was she wasn't like highborn, but she was wealthy. And so she received a very good education. She became a lady, you know, in that sense, not in the proper term, but she was very much a lady. Like she was meant to do only certain things. She wasn't meant to labor.
Right.
And the scrapbooks that were made. So scrapbooks and album structures are one of my favorite things because during the 19th century, people got really into this. So like I talked about, the mass production of like printed items started to happen. People really liked them. People really got into their aesthetic. They actually started producing the women's magazines, you know, with all of these beautiful things inside of them, such as, you know, different figures or flowers or motifs that you could cut out and then save, along with recipes or songs or, you know, women's culture, the gossip of the day, anything that you wanted to talk about. Yeah. And also printing really came a long way as well. So you're now printing these beautiful, really beautiful images, and very good detail as well. So scrapbooks became very, very popular, and scrapbook making, like the publishing of scrapbook structures, became very popular. However, it's the late 19th century. Materials are not always made to be super long lasting because of these more industrialized processes, and so they tend to break apart and yellow. So over the course of around 6 months, I think it was, I was able to put together this huge scrapbook of this lady's great-grandmother's or grandmother's Victorian album, which was one of the most amazing things, because I emailed about the processes I was doing, about how I put it all back together again. I modified the binding structure in order to actually make it work with the fact that the pages were so brittle at this point. So you couldn't use the original structure because it was a very stiff binding. Yeah. And she was really grateful for it. And I got to work with another conservator who created this beautiful presentation box for her. So she got to keep it. I would say some of the things at the Smithsonian that I got to look at was, so I didn't work with books. So I did work at the Smithsonian, but I didn't work with books. I worked with World War I propaganda posters, which were incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Gorgeous, and
did those save well, like the colors and the
yeah, those stayed really, really well. I think a lot of that was due to the fact that they were taken and stored pretty much immediately. These weren't posted on the sides of barns or, at City Hall or anything like that. They were kept very, very nicely. But one of the other things that I really loved working with was I got to see the original Uncle Sam watercolor. My supervisor worked on that while I got to work on one of the first 5 printings of the Uncle Sam We Want You poster, which was a really incredible experience. Definitely one I've never forgotten, to work on one of the firsts of those. Very iconic. And then one of the other things that I really loved working with was I got to do a bit of, so I did work with some photographs, and I got to work with Avedon's portraits of the Kennedys. So that was something. It's absolutely incredible because it's all of the contact sheets. So it's not like the full completed, oh, that's the one picture. It's,
Right.
you see the kids, running up and wanting to sit on the lap, and then they're changing position, and, and Avedon, a brilliant photographer, is, taking these really incredible, it feels almost intimate, just like, look into a family, what their lives were like.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't see any of that. You just see the final Instagram perfect shot, right?
Yeah.
You don't see
yeah, and especially the Kennedys. It was like, and they're just so, the photography was just incredible. So that was definitely a highlight for me. And then I would say, definitely I've ended up working with the Army Heritage and Education Center, which I've gotten to work on. There was a code book that they had, which is a Renaissance code book that they had in their collection, which I was like, why is this here? The other thing that really threw me on this, and I'm actually presenting a poster at a conference on it in May, on this particular book, was I picked it up and it looked like this type of binding. Okay. So I'm expecting something that's, 18th century, maybe, like 19th, 18th century, maybe.
Yeah.
I pick it up and there's this book from not then. And I was like, what are you doing here? And why do you look disguised? That was my first thought. Why have you been given this new binding? And rebindings are not uncommon. A lot of books have been rebound in the 19th century. Lots of huge libraries were completely rebound and all their original bindings gone. So I was really confused about this book. So it ended up leading me to do work because I was like, well, what did it originally look like? Right. And I ended up, this is right before COVID hit, I believe. Yeah, it was right before lockdown, quarantines, and all that other stuff happened. And I looked into, I was like, well, does anybody else have a copy that I could see, And the closest place was the National Cryptologic Museum. And this book from the Army led me to the National Cryptologic Museum, where they had multiple copies of this type of book. And it led me on this wild goose chase of just looking into these types of early code making, cipher making books, and what that really looked like in the Renaissance, and who was doing it, and why were they doing it, and what is it being used for. And it was really, really fascinating. But from the Army to the NSA's, National Cryptologic Museum, I also got to handle and work on not do interventive treatments, but it was more of like condition surveys and that types of things. Most of their books at National Cryptologic Museum are in great shape. But I was doing a condition survey for them, just so that way they could get a sense of like which books really needed to be worked on, which ones were really good, that sort of thing. They have a U-boat code book, which during World War II, these were incredibly difficult to get because these books could either be doused with water and like the pages would dissolve, or they would be doused with water and all the print would be lost because like it would bring out other print that's inherent in the pages. So when these boats were, you know, trying to be captured, you know, by the Allies, these books would be immediately destroyed.
Was that on purpose?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Nazis didn't want, you know, people to get to them. So it was so difficult to get the U-books, the U-boat code books. And honestly, like to be able to capture a U-boat, board it, get everybody out, you know, or stop them from destroying this book took an incredible feat and actually aided in, you know, ending the war because like it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. I highly recommend, you know, if anyone gets a chance to go to the National Cryptologic Museum.
Yeah. Where is this?
This is in Maryland.
Maryland. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Oh my gosh! Yeah, I have to go see that. That sounds amazing.
And and they've recently had a renovation and everything. And I got to consult a bit about the lighting of their rare book display. So they have a whole section now dedicated to their rare books, which I'm very excited about. They have a really incredible collection, as does, might I add, the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center. They have really incredible collections where you can go in and request to see things, you know, obviously with purpose, you know, it's not, you know, but if you have an interest in these books and you're looking for different things, both of them have really incredible collections, just some hidden jewels in Pennsylvania and Maryland.
Wow. I'm going to ask Alicia here. Have you been to the Cryptology Museum? She says, I've been. Which one have you been to? Because that sounds amazing. Oh my gosh. Before the renovation. So was that?
Oh, so it's time to go back.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. That would be so amazing. That's like, that's story fodder right there.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible. And also what is also really amazing is the diversity of the people who have worked in ciphers and code making and code breaking, you know, for the United States. That's something that I think is not really talked about too much, but it's something that it is well known, is that there's so many different types of people who have worked in those and who are, I would say, very like really good people who are like, no, I can do this. And the way their minds work to do that. That's incredible. Yeah. But yeah, they have a really, really amazing stuff. One of the cool things was seeing like how popular code making and code breaking was actually in the what was it, in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s.
Yeah.
They have a few examples of books that are French books that are like ciphers and code breaking for fun.
Right. Yeah.
And that was something I never thought of. Like people were doing this for fun. And they formed clubs and everything. Yeah. So they have scrapbooks of people who formed these cipher clubs together, and they would make and break codes and try to like pit themselves, basically, you know, a battle of the wits against one another. And so they would meet annually, and I forget the name of the group. And I can hear Rob, who's the librarian, being like, the group's name is this. But they formed this really incredible group that came together, and their minds of like creating codes and cracking them as well. Yeah, just really incredible people.
That is fascinating. I've read The Woman Who Smashed Codes. I've read that.
Yes.
Yeah, which is about the wife and the couple that did it.
But yeah, the author actually went to the National Cryptologic Museum to do research. Yes.
Yeah.
She went there to do research on the people, and so they talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Well, and they went to the Marshall Museum, which is at VMI, which is where my grandparents are. And I actually worked at the Marshall Museum for a summer. That was one of my first jobs, like in the middle of college. And so like I've seen, you know, these papers and stuff, and oh, that's cool, you know, and then this guy wrote this book, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's fascinating. It's so cool. So, but yeah, all that the early ciphers. But going back to like the Renaissance ones, like that's wow.
It's a strange world of like how they were coming up with it. The guy who wrote one of the earliest cipher books, Tritemius, he was actually accused of like witchcraft because of coming up with codes. And he was like,
Right.
you can use this, like do this little math thing, and then you can break it. And people are like, what is that? You know,
Right.
so I'm absolutely fascinated by it, and I absolutely love it. But there's some really incredible, just really some really incredible books in there, and they have what's called I think they're called like vovels or vovellas. I've never heard it pronounced. I've only read this word, but it's basically these little ciphers. So you have like this. So you have a page. You have a crossbar that like connects one area, and then you have this little wheel that you can turn, and you align it. It has have something written on it, and you align it with this little bar that goes across. Okay. And you see it a lot in like astronomy or astrology types of books, and they like rotate it, like, oh, in this season, this is when this constellation will rise, you know, and that sort of thing. Yeah. But in the French translation and publication of Tritemius's code book, his cipher called Polygraphy, the guy, Gabriel de Coulanges, I might be mispronouncing that as well, but he and the printer decided to put in a bunch of these little turn wheels within it, so you can see and make your codes and break them and stuff like that. Yeah. Pretty cool.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So cool.
But yeah, and there's all these like these weird things that you find in books that in older books that I wish were brought back into modern books.
Right. So like what? If you could see something, you know, coming back, like, do you like the 4-edge painting type thing that's going around, or?
I would say I do, but I'm always hesitant with 4-edge stuff. Like the hidden paintings, I don't mind because they're a bit more hidden, but like you see so this book was originally very red.
Right.
And it wears away as you read it, because that's where your fingers go. So I would say I'm not always very keen on having something right there to, you know, scrape my fingers against.
If you're actually going to read it.
Yeah, if you're actually going to read it. If it's going to look beautiful, hey, go for it.
Right.
You know, but to read, I would like something I would love to see come back is goffered edges, which is where there's actually a bit of a 3D design that's put into the edge of the book. It's actually a type of book that I don't have that aesthetic or that accent in my collection just yet. I would love to have a book that has a goffered edge. And they look really, really beautiful. But you see that also sometimes there's gilt edges that have details and designs on them. This like slightly like indented, they tool it, and it has like a little bit of like a 2.5D surface on it, which looks really cool. But another thing I would like to see a bit more of is, so this book is a book, but it is also a box.
Oh my gosh.
So these are historic book boxes, and I would love to see more of these come back into fashion. So I was able to find this one and snag it for a good price, but typically these things fly off of like, in the auction scene, because they're just so adorable. You like put it in there, but like you could hide a little key, you could, you know, put some photos in there. I'm obsessed with this little book box. Yeah. And then something else that was strange. Well, we're just talking about weird things. So this was my newest book that I actually got from that guy with the books, and that's his website name, but Zubarul Islam. And he, so I just bought this one. So if you notice, so this book is from much earlier, but this book is the large version of this one, in a sense. Okay, so you notice the similarities. They're both made with the Almtod skin on them. They both have the brass clasps, you know, so their style's very similar. But this one's actually of that time period, so like 100 years earlier.
Okay.
And it's still wooden boards, which
Okay.
I love. But this little mystery of these little holes.
Yeah.
Where something was either carved out, or I'm wondering if this was used to hide something like coins.
Yeah.
Because they're the perfect size to hide coins. So I don't know. This is all conjecture, total conjecture about this book, but it is one of my absolute favorite new books, and it's so tiny. I think that's the thing I love.
Yes, I know. What is it about little books that are just?
I just love it so much. I think the other thing is like I've bought many large, heavy books, and so carrying them around, it becomes laborious. So now I'm focusing more on smaller, tiny books. But I wonder about that sometimes. Similar to the box is like I've been thinking about getting a coin of the period and like, can I just like fit it in there?
Right. Yeah.
Work. But we'll never know. I wonder about that sometimes, because the other thing is there is some writing here, and there are some, like, I want to see if I could read that. There's some little circles around the areas. You know, I've gotta do a bit more investigating. Maybe see if there's any other books that are out there that have holes, round holes carved in them. You know, who knows?
Yeah, just one hidden genius.
Yeah. So, you know, it'd be a good way to hide some money if you need it. Like, who's gonna look, you know?
Absolutely. You just grab that and run out. That is so cool. So do you like seeing art where they take like broken books and things, like modern day ones, like where they've taken old books and pages out and turned them into things? Do you think that's
it's grotesque, like cannibal?
Yeah. Or is it?
No, I don't. There's a wonderful, if I could say, universe of artist books, which are books that we might not necessarily consider the traditional form of a book. And they're made out of different things. And the concept of what is a book then really gets stretched. And I absolutely love seeing artist books. I love seeing people take books and make art out of them. I think, barring, as long as it's not something that's like culturally significant, you know, please don't just this. So it's like saying, you know, please don't cut up the Mona Lisa to turn it into like a scrapbook project, you know. But other than that, I think it's something that's really creative. I think it's useful, and I think it's a wonderful way to reinvent the book itself, because when we think about, like, there's so many books that have been printed. Not all of them are read anymore. Why not give them a new life? Using a book, even if for another book, is something that's been traditionally done. And I have an example of that here. So this book doesn't have a, okay. So this book is from, I believe this one is from this is from the 1700s, so 18th century. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful book. And inside are these bits of likely a medieval manuscript.
Oh my God.
That are left. So, but they're used to support the spine, you know, to line the spine, you know, in this one. So using books, like, it's historic to use older books, the older form of a book, because they're made of good materials and all these other things. If you're no longer using it, recreate it into something else. And so when books became out of fashion, or there was a new style, or, you know, they were no longer reading this author, those books would be reused again. You know, even especially, like, we even see it in you know, printer's waste. We see, you know, bits of text, you know, on the spine of a book. You know, you see that a lot in late 19th century stuff. You know, if you ever seen a broken spine, there's like some text on it or something like that. It's like a printed page. So it's like some sort of binder's waste or, you know, something like that, printer's waste that's being used again. There's historic precedent for reusing a book in a new way. You know, I love the form of the book and I love seeing the use and reuse of the book. One of my favorite things I've been able to collect is this is a little academic book. It's French. It is from 1808, and it's covered in this French newspaper or article thing. And they were like, "Oh, we'll just cover it in this." You know, and that's going to be the cover now. You know, so reusing something that they already had. Do I have another one of that? I don't know if I have another one of that right away, but even like this book, this is more of a restoration. It's not a reuse, but I've worked on other books that they've been immediately reused. I published an article, I think it was either in the Icon or ICOM. There's like two organizations that have similar names, but about basically this military textbook that its cover was reused from something else. So its cover is much older than it is. And it was one of the most fun projects I got to work on with the Army. And like this book has a cover and everything. This book also has a little bit of mouse damage. So a little mouse got to it. So then that's which I thought was so precious. And this is literally why I bought the book. When I say I buy books for damage, is because you know, this is why you don't put food near your books. Don't bring food into a library.
Right.
It encourages rodents to come nibble away.
Oh my goodness.
But something I loved about this book is this is the original cover.
Oh my gosh.
Underneath another cover.
Yeah.
So you can see how beautifully tooled.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So very elaborate. But the one underneath is also incredibly elaborate with its tooling and its designs. And so one of my goals is after the semester ends is I'm going to see if I can tease away the new cover and keep it, not throw it away, but if to reveal what the original cover is underneath that, because just what did it look like? You know, what were they using? So yeah, so there's lots of great things. There's lots of historic precedent for books being reused.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and then so are bookworms a real thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I can show you some itty bitty bookworm. Let me find it. I can show you some tiny bookworm holes.
Is it like an actual worm, or is it smaller than a worm? No, it's an actual worm.
Well, they're called bookworms, but like they're like an insect, you know, and they eat into books. And you know a bookworm when you see, I have an example because I always show it to my interns when they come to, there's these little holes that you'll find, and they look like little pinholes. I don't know if you're going to be able to see these things, but very well. But do you see this tiny hole? Tiny hole right there.
Oh, teeny tiny. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's created by a bookworm. Oh my goodness. I believe. Yeah. Pretty sure those are bookworms. There's these also. The back of this book was ravaged by insects. Oh, wow. Likely some sort of, could be either like bookworm, or it could also have been, there's lots of different types of insects depending on the region that you're in. Yeah. The types of damage that they'll cause. But bookworms, you'll see these like little burrowing holes that will go in like so many pages and stop, or they'll go all the way through the book. Yeah, but you'll see them eating it. And there's different types of insect damages, and we can tell what types of things we're actually eating at the book based on their pattern of damage.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So silverfish are another big one that I'm always worried about because they tend to come in with like the moisture. Mice tend to like it because this is like a carb, you know.
Yeah.
House centipedes are actually a book lover's good friend because house centipedes love to eat silverfish.
Okay.
And house centipedes really freak me out. I don't like the look of them. They have too many legs. But they eat silverfish, and I try to remind myself of that every time.
Whenever you see one.
Yeah.
So how do they, like in where you're working with old books and stuff, how do they keep it all sealed off? Is it pretty
Yeah,
so doors and
so a lot of places have what's called integrated pest management. And this is a process that museums across the board like really try to implement. And so a lot of those things are putting out bug traps. You quarantine any items that are about to be added into the collection. So you really want to put them under a certain condition. Sometimes they'll freeze items in order to kill off anything. I do that actually with my books. I recently had, not recently, but in the last few years, I bought a bunch of books, but they said, oh, these were kept in a barn. And I went, oh, lovely. I wanted them. And I said, well, they're not coming in the house until I've like put them in a freezer that doesn't have any food in it, but a freezer just for the books themselves. And I left it in for about 2 weeks. You don't have to leave it in that long, but I left it in for about 2 weeks. And then took it out just in case there was something alive in it. And you set it to a certain temperature and you leave it in for a certain amount of time and it'll kill the bugs that are inside. So that's like one of the ways that it can be done. Pest traps are usually set out in different areas where there's likely to be some sort of foot traffic, by insects. And the other thing is like, you also want to monitor your books, it's always good to monitor, and just to see like what's going on. And that's one of the reasons why, you don't allow like food and drink, any sugars, anything that would entice a bug to get in and come towards your collection. And that's really important, because, is sometimes why I cringe a little bit when I see posts of people putting like their coffee right next to, their books. I definitely, for other types of books, not this collection, but my collection, I definitely drink tea near my books and stuff like that. But if you want to preserve your books as much as you can, you want to consider the way in which insects might want to come closer and closer towards them and see them as food.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Any other tips and tricks for people looking to get into collecting or book binding or restoration?
Yeah. I would say if you are interested in getting into collecting, one of the first things I would do is start with making a list. Make a list of what it is that you actually want to collect and maybe why. Because there are so many books out there. My collection's based off of materiality. So like these things, they're not from the same era. Neither is this one. So I would make a list, prioritize. The other thing is I would definitely say set a budget. Don't go over that because you don't want to regret buying a book. I think that's something that's really sad if you ever end up regretting something. I have made mistakes, but you don't, want to have that, especially for something. So set your budget. You can definitely find reasonable deals out there. I say go check out some different rare booksellers, go to a rare book fair in your area. A quick Google search or internet search will definitely take you there. Reach out to some rare booksellers. There's lots of different educational areas that you can look for. So that's one of the ways you can get into it. If you're interested in getting into book binding, there's quite a few books. Actually, Patricia, I could send you a list of some books I would recommend if people are interested in book binding.
Yeah, I'll put them down below.
Yeah. And if you're interested in conservation as a field, The first thing I would say is, go to the American Institute for Conservation. They have lots of resources for people in order to get into the, what it takes to be a conservator, what it takes to work with rare books and work with curators and museums and in private collectors as well.
Yeah.
The other thing I would also recommend is if you have something that's of family value that you would like to see restored, please don't do it yourself.
Yes.
I would only because it usually ends up taking more time and more effort and more money to undo someone's mistakes through not really understanding about book structure, the materials, and what can actually be done as conservation. There are lots of conservators. You can actually find one in your local area from the American Institute for Conservation. Their website allows you to find a conservator nearby.
Yeah.
You can consult with them before hiring them. You can talk about a price range. You can talk about, like what's the estimated costs for this. But I would highly encourage you to go talk to a conservator. And for family collections is one of the best things you can do in order to preserve what your family has in your family's legacy. I would say for some tips for collectors within their homes, one of the big things is don't put your books, if you can, don't put your books in front of a window because you'll end up fading all of their beautiful spines. Or if you're putting them foredge out, you'll fade their foredges really, really fast. Please don't store your books, generally speaking, foredges out because paper will turn yellow from the sunlight. The other thing is like notice where, if you can, if you know where the pipes are in your house, try not to put your books directly underneath a pipe just in case it does burst.
Yeah.
And try not to store them directly onto an outside wall. Outside walls are where there tends to be the largest temperature fluctuations and humidity fluctuations.
Okay.
And this can end up causing long-term damage to your books. So you won't see it right away, but it will accumulate over a period of time. And that's if you can. I know not everybody can, like there could be different living situations and wall spaces, but it's always good to be mindful about where your books are being stored and how to take care of them best. And so I hope this helps.
Yeah. Absolutely. If anybody else has any other questions, did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on? Any other books that we didn't touch on?
I do have 3 more books.
Okay, go
really fun.
Yes.
And yeah, so I have 3 more books that are very, very fun that I would love to share. And the store, that guy with the books, he sometimes does like special catalogs of these.
Okay.
These types of books. Ooh. These are very fun. These are mid-19th century, what are called cartonnage or chocolate box binding books. I don't know if this one is it's on the edge of considering one of those, but this one is definitely. But these have these beautiful colors to them, this brass pretending to be gold gilt area, these vibrant colors, these gorgeous lithographs right here. Yeah. The other thing is they are like a little 2.5D, so these are like raised areas.
Yeah.
And this is the back of it, just beautiful, right? Chocolate box bindings, I'm obsessed. And so I bought like 6 of these now because I just couldn't help myself.
Are they called that because they look like a chocolate box? They're just
they're just so luxurious. And I think this is something that is actually really wonderful that came out of that mass production of books in the industrial era is, people were able to get really creative really quickly. We think about what it took to do something like this, very labor intensive, very costly. This one, more mass produced. Yes, it's still going to be a little costly, but not even close to the money that you would spend to get tooling and detail all over this, or even the other one that I showed. So these I think are so much fun. These are definitely within collectors' budget. So if you're interested in this type of book, I think this is a great one to start with. Because they're gorgeous. And they're filled with like really wonderful little things, like little stories about saints or moral stories, you know, or like inventions or even education. This one is all about insects. It's filled with these gorgeous little illustrations. So this is one of my favorite things to show my interns because, you know, historically, like there's lots of different reasons why a book would be in the form that it's in, and having this chocolate box binding where it's this more mass-produced style, but it also allows people to have something that's almost quite luxurious with their hands.
Is that more European, or you find them US everywhere?
These are French. So the majority of them that I've seen have been French. I don't know if I've seen any that are in English, but they're also, I don't think they're like very super complicated French either. So if you're learning French, this actually is like a great way to read it, something beautiful and you can read. One of my absolute favorite books in my collection that I couldn't believe I was actually able to purchase. So is this copy of Scott's Lady of the Lake.
Oh my goodness.
And I am absolutely obsessed with this. So this book actually came out, does it say when it was printed? I know it's either very late or very late 19th century or around like early 20th century, somewhere around there, I believe. It's definitely not newer than like the 1930s, from what I remember. I will double check that though. So nobody quote me on that just yet. But what I love about this book is beautiful gilt edges on it. And what I love about it is there weren't many of these produced, and wood. These beautiful thick wooden boards that are, you know, gorgeously sloped. And I'm pretty obsessed with this book because it is like, Scotland is one of my favorite places. I was fortunate enough to live there very briefly and work there very briefly, but I did. And one of my favorite things about this book is it's like Scotland on Scotland on Scotland.
Yeah.
Let me share the secrets of this book, which I'm obsessed with. So first off, by Scott, Lady of the Lake. How classic is that? I was like, these fantastic wooden boards. And I was like, I love this binding already. I am so down for it. Very creative. And then one of my favorite things about this book, so let me open it up, is it is filled with photographs of the areas where Scott included it within the poem. So areas that would like inspire the places that were included within the poem. So it is absolutely filled with these photographs of all of these little areas. Yeah, of Scotland, which I absolutely love. The other thing is, all right, the wooden boards.
Yeah.
Why did they do this wooden board? So it says warranted oak from Stirling Castle of the Royal Palace and bought in the Douglas Room. So we're from a tree around Stirling Castle.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so I think this is a Scottish. I don't know if you get any more Scottish of a book.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Except maybe a Scottish wheel binding, which is like the Scots had their own type of decorative binding style. And that's another type of book I would love to own, but those are very expensive. But this is one of my personal favorites due to, you know, I'm pretty sure this is a 20th century book. It's either late 19th or early 20 or around the 20th century book. Right. I can't quite remember the date, and you know, shame on me, honestly, for that.
Well, and the front thing, is that wood etched?
No, this is actually a photograph that's been lacquered.
lacquered onto it.
Wow. Yeah, lacquered onto it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's just one of the most adorable books that I've ever seen, but it's a beautiful, not completely mass produced, as far as like, thousands and thousands of copies, but this style of binding you can find for other books. But I absolutely love just how Scottish this is.
Yeah, it's great condition.
It is, yeah. It was held really well, and I felt very, very lucky to be able to purchase that one when I saw it, because I was like, that's pretty incredible. So,
oh my gosh, that's a one of a kind. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't think it's one of a kind. I still think that there's others out there.
Well, one of yeah.
I was like, yeah. I think there's a lot more copies of this book out there.
Right. And then you had another chocolate box that.
Oh yeah, I don't know if this one's totally considered a chocolate box binding, but it is similar to that in the sense of it's of the same time period. It, French. These beautiful. This is actually leather, not paper. So chocolate box bindings can also be called cartonnage bindings because they're made from like pressed paper. And this is covered though with leather, and this has a stiff board on it, but it has this beautiful stamped tooling all in here, and then you have the gilt as well, and it's very this strange sort of leather dyeing. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not a rare book seller with the bibliography type of terms for everything that would like know that, like what to specifically call all of these components, although I'm sure I could look them up. It also has this beautiful marbling. I can show that. Here with these kind of like little fish eye areas. So different patterns of marbling come with different names. I'm familiar with a few of them, not all the patterns of marbling, but I know that this is a pattern, and so you can even look that up as well. And then this is the inside marbling, which is gorgeous.
Yeah.
So yeah, and this one, this book is 1850, beautiful white pages. It's done really well. There's these fantastic, I think it's a story about, if anyone knows, but I think it's a story about a man and like kind of like his life and what he did. And yeah, there's these crazy illustrations inside.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful illustrations, yeah. No, I don't think anybody wants a jaguar leaping out at them and axe around, but yeah, I think like one day when I learn French, I would love to read a lot of my French books.
Right.
But yeah, I think that'll be after my PhD program. So yeah.
Did you say you know a little Latin though? So that's
just a little bit. I know enough to read some titles, and I think that's really about like where the extent of my other languages really ends, only because I never really studied Latin that much, but you start getting exposed to things again and again and again, and you start to like pick up like what the phrase, like certain phrases that you'll see and what they'll mean, and and the same thing has happened with my French. So
So Leah was asking, why are most antiquarian books in French? Or is that just your collection happens to be mostly?
It just happens to be my collection. It just happened to be what I was able to afford at the time. There are French bindings, there are English bindings, there's a whole history of British bindings, and what those are and who was doing them and everything with that. There's German bindings. I do have a few German books when I was over. When I say German, I mean the German language, not necessarily Germany as a proper nation, because as we know, like the modern borders of the nations weren't always there, but like German language. So I have a few of those and German bindings as well, which are really cool. Something that's cool about the German bindings is they tended to keep the older styles longer. And so you'll see a German binding that looks like, compared to like a French binding at the same time period, it'll look a bit older. So they kept those older styles of binding a little longer, which is really neat with the trends of bindings. And you'll see, Italian styles and stuff. So there's all the different I don't know, look into each of who's doing the binding and what trends were coming about at what time periods and what materials were being used and the trade routes. And you really learn about all those things. Yeah. My collection just happens to be a bit more French, mostly because I think I was able to purchase some. That guy with the books is located in Canada. Canadians, the French, and there's been a lot of things that I've seen recently that came up within my price range on like different auction sites. They all just happen to be French. Yeah.
Have you seen anything from outside of Europe, from Asia or any other?
Yes, I've worked on a few things, like Japanese items. They would be like 19th century, 20th century tourist items that have come out. So I've worked with those, some like photograph albums that came out of Japan, which were really cool.
Wow.
And I feel really privileged to work with them. I've done some like book binding for Islamic bindings, but I've never actually done a conservation work on anything from the Islamic world, although I would love to get a chance to, because they are really beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Some of the Qurans I've seen are just stunning. So I would love to get a chance to work with something that came out of the Islamic world as well, but I've never been able to. Just hasn't worked out right now with the job and the collections I've been with. Yeah.
Do you work with a lot of American things at your current job? I mean, how far back in American history do we really have books?
Yeah, well, I think the earliest piece of American items that I've ever worked with was like money from the Continental Congress. So that's not that long ago, but like the 1700s that's been the earliest I've ever worked with anything from America. The other thing is you have to consider when America was a colony, and Europeans were coming over here, their first thought was not, let's get book and paper over here. It was more like, grow things. So it's only until, like once there's been more established that they actually started, like we think of Benjamin Franklin and his printing and, and things like that. It's only after things really get established that we start to see things that are American, if I could say that, or at least a European colonied Americanism in there. Yeah. But there is also lots of incredible Native American items that are out there, different Native American writings that are out there. And those aren't what we would consider, a typical book. Those are on like skins. Some of them are on bark, and they're absolutely incredible. And they have withstood actually pretty wonderfully some of the test of time. And so when we think about the writing of that's coming out of this region of the world and when it's from, that's also something else that's really important to consider about is like who's doing that writing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Alicia is asking, what's the oldest thing you've ever worked with or seen?
Seen in person. The oldest thing I've ever worked with, I think, is or like that came into the studio when, as like a book conservator that came into the studio. I think it was something from, was it Robert the Bruce? Was really cool. There was like a document that came and it like mentioned that he was there, like in the room or something like that. Yeah, it was like, what the heck is this? This is amazing.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, what? That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I've seen some like early medieval manuscripts. I have medieval leaf from a manuscript that's from Oxford, and the date is around 1250. That's the oldest thing I own. I don't have it here with me. I tend not to take it out of like
right.
the collection, unless for like very specific reasons. There's I think the oldest thing I've seen in person as far as items, like there's been some stuff that I've seen from like the ancient world, and that comes like from object conservators. That tends to be in like ceramic, something from the ancient world. We see those a lot, in museums, like different things from like the Greeks or from the Babylonians and different areas. But you get to handle a lot of different things, as a conservator. And I think the other thing is like sometimes it's not always what I would say the media portrays us as. Like Wonder Woman is like in this gorgeous dress cleaning this sculpture, like we don't typically wear gorgeous dresses all the time. We don't get invited to the galas at the end of the day, or not typically, I should say, but and then of course, you think about what is it? National Treasure, one of the great ones. Like I'm like the person who does work on this thing, and it is really I love that movie so much, especially since I've been in the different areas in DC where different locations are filmed. Right. Like, those steps aren't in the Library of Congress. They filmed that at a different building or over here. It's like definitely pieced together. Right. But, something, I don't recommend doing is, like rubbing any lemon on anything old that you have and breathing on it. Okay. Yeah. That. Even if you think it will lead you to treasure, please call somebody. Please call a conservator. But, something I love about that movie so much is it got people really interested in history, and it got them interested in the things of history, not just that history exists, but like what are the things of history. And that's one of the reasons why I love that so much is thinking about what research is there and what can you really learn from it, and then what secrets does it have, like like this book, like what little secrets does it have, why was it done, so that's what I love about that. And but we're definitely not like I think always portrayed. I think like book conservators specifically are portrayed very strangely in the media. We're either portrayed as like, I think a lot of the times we're portrayed as serial killers, like in like the series You, like he's like doing terrible things to people, and he's like restoring his books like in this like basement or something. And there's like another film about a book conservator, but who ends up like doing something bizarre. And I'm like, no, we're not those people. I think we're just a bunch of people who we really like books, and we just really like doing things with our hands. We enjoy materials, we enjoy history, we enjoy putting that all together and doing something productive with that. And it turned into book conservation.
It's such a meeting of science and history.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you enjoy both of those things and think that like, oh, I can only do one or the other, that's not true. That's not true at all. There's a huge field, and conservation is so much bigger. Like I talk about, book and paper, but there's, conservations for like underwater archaeology that I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the talk. There's conservation of outdoor sculptures. There's conservation of firearms. There's people who just look into the history of like weapons. There's conservation of metals. There's conservation of textiles and clothing. There's people who specialize in the conservation of natural history items like taxidermied animals and like, historically done taxidermied stuff. And how do you deal with that? And how do you approach it? All these different complex things. There's people who focus on, furniture, which is its own whole thing. And so if you're interested in it, there's definitely a conservation field for it.
Wow, that is so cool. So are there any fictional books, like historical fiction books where they've portrayed? But I'm trying to think of anything.
There's The People of the Book, and that was a fictional book that portrayed a book conservator in it. It's not, I would say, like the most accurate as far as the academic career of the book conservator, only because there's definitely some liberties that the author took with what being a conservator is like. But it's a book, it's fictional, and it is a very fun book to read. But it focuses on, you follow this modern times, this book conservator who gets called in to look at this very particular book and try to understand the different material aspects of it. And when she looks into one material aspect, she ends up finding, like, you read the background story behind that, and you see all these people and their lives and how they were related to this one book. And I think cool. And I think it really does speak to the fact that, like, books change hands, books get added to, books are created, and things like fall into them, a note or a feather, or, you put things in them. And what does that mean at the end of the day? If you're looking at it, we all add to the book that we own, and what does that mean? So is really, it's a really fun book. And if you enjoy books about books, this one's definitely for that reader.
Okay.
Yeah. There's some other books, like, was it Club Dante? I think it's called. I don't quite remember. I think, or it's the Dante Club, which is more about a rare book seller, or he's like a rare book researcher. And he goes on this quest to find this book, or it's called Club Dumas, or something like that. I can't quite remember. So forgive me, anyone who views this in the future, please don't judge me.
We'll Google it.
And we'll put it in the link below. But it's a fun book about this guy who he's kind of like a rare book bounty hunter. I don't know how else to call it that, but he has this book and is like, is it real or is it not? And, like, he goes on this huge journey about, figuring out, like, what is this book? And, and there's all these fraught with danger and like slight romance in it, and a twist at the end. So it is fun. I think there was a movie that was made by it, and it stars Johnny Depp, and I think it's called, like, The Ninth Gate or something like that. I've not seen it, but the book was interesting. I think they consider it kind of scary, but I didn't think it was very scary. But I don't know.
All right. Cool. Well, it sounds like there's a niche market there then, that somebody needs to read, Leah. Somebody needs to read a book.
Fingers crossed. I would. I mean, hopefully, maybe soon, maybe this year, there'll be another book to help fill that market.
That would be so cool.
But conservators do some cool things.
Absolutely. That is so cool. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Anything else that you wanted to? I know we could talk for hours.
I think that's. I think I've touched on all the major points. So I think we're good.
Well, everybody, be sure to follow her, and if you have any other further questions, follow her and ping her with questions at Bibliobrunette on Instagram, and if and through there you can find that guy with the books, and I started following him too, and there's so many great people out there working with books right now, and but Leah's feed is just always full of such beautiful things. So, and lots of Tolkien. Tolkien. So I think today was National Reading Day or something like that.
It is.
So lots of fun stuff there too. So If you have any other further questions, feel free to ask either one of us. And thank you so much, Leah. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel really, really grateful and privileged to like get to share a bit about what I do and share a bit about the field that I just absolutely love.
I think that's just it's. I never really thought about the science behind all of it, and I just think that's a missed avenue. I don't think enough people know about it. So that's just so cool. Awesome. So women scientists out there, go. There's so many different things that you can do. It's just so cool.
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you, everybody. We'll sign off and we'll see you next time.